All right, my guest today, Kevin Holt. He is a criminal defense attorney here and in the Tri-Cities, handles DUI cases from time to time. And he was just laying out for us what we need to know when we get stopped. But let's say we've already spent our 24 hours in jail or whatever, and we're looking at this charge of DUI. What are my options? What am I going to do? Well, I don't want to talk about me personally, but I mean, what can people do?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can approach a DUI. Depending on which number of DUIs this is, you could take the minimum penalties and just simply plead guilty. The problem with that is that there are consequences you may not be aware of and able to deal with. Washington State has two separate things that are going to happen to you when you're charged with a DUI. One is there's going to be an administrative process, which is based on the fact that when you get a driver's license, you have a contract with the state not to drive with alcohol in your system greater than a .08. And you agree that if you're driving, a police officer arrests you, you're going to voluntarily take a test. DOL will suspend your license independently of whatever happens to you in court. And then you also have what's going on criminally, which is a possible suspension by the court, minimum for your first time for a DUI below a 1.8, 1 day in jail, greater than an .08, 15 days in jail, 2 days in jail, and 30 days electronic home monitoring, minimum of $800 fine for your first DUI, $1,500 for your second DUI, and that's exclusive of all the other costs that we think of as fines that aren't really called fines, because you're going to have to pay for an alcohol evaluation. You're going to have to pay $250 for the officer being off the road. You're going to have to pay money for taking the breath test. You're going to have to pay a traffic penalty assessment.
Okay, so this is if I decide to plead guilty. Yes,
Right.
I was driving drunk. Okay, so then that's on your record forever too. So what kind of how if you rounded that all out, how much money is that?
It's going to cost you about $5,000 for your first DUI.
And then you've got that on your record forever.
Well,
Ouch.
it counts against you for 7 years on your driving record.
Okay, 7 years. All right.
But yeah, somebody could find it forever if they really want to look for it.
And then I can't drive. My driver's license is taken away for an entire year.
Well, it depends on how much alcohol you have in your system. It's taken away for 90 days if it's your first DUI, and you had below a 1.5. If you're above a 1.5, it's taken for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways, though, that you can keep your driver's license.
Okay.
And that's probably what's most important to anybody is the driver's license. Used to be, everybody talked about something called the deferred prosecution. And deferred prosecution is available to alcoholics, people who have an alcohol problem, people who admit that they cannot not drink without treatment.
Oh, so it's not the occasional drinker that had too much, like maybe 3 glasses of wine and...
No, absolutely not. And people used to lie about that to the treatment providers so that they could try to get a deferred prosecution.
Well, don't you think they still do? Come on.
Yeah, they do, but
yeah.
I was talking with another attorney about this, and I think that that's really gone down in our numbers because legislature created something called ignition interlock device driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can actually apply for ignition interlock device driver's license that will allow you to keep your driver's license with your DUI. So that's a good thing.
That's expensive.
Yeah,
it
is.
And you pay for it all yourself. How much is that thing?
I think it's $15 a day is the last person I talked to. So
$15 a day just to lease it, kind of.
Yeah.
And then what does it require you to do? I've heard that it requires you to, like every 15 minutes, you have to blow into it.
Well, it requires a blow when you start.
Yes.
And then periodically while you're driving,
Yes.
it will ask you to blow. I've never heard that it's every 15 minutes.
Okay.
And people used to have ways they try to get around that,
Yeah.
but really there's no way to defeat the machine.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one was the guy who said that he used to blow up hot air balloons or regular balloons with his own breath, and then when it came up, he'd feed his breath through the balloon back into the thing. And I was talking to a technician. He said, he says 5-10 years ago that might have worked, but it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Once again, I mean, over and over and over is the point of just call a cab. Call a cab. That's what they do. And anywhere in the Tri-Cities here, it can't be more than probably $20. to take you somewhere, and that $20 seems like it would be worth it.
A lot cheaper than paying me.
Yeah. You don't need the business, do you?
Not really.
Yeah. All right. So, what type of clients? You know, are we just are they all ranges of people, ages, economic, or is there a certain type of person that ends up making this goofy decision?
No, I think that's a big misconception. People think, well, we've got all these people out here who are serious alcoholics, you know, driving around with a 1.5, or, you know, dangerous drunks. And, you know, maybe that was the case 20 years ago. But with the BAC limits now and the awareness that most people have, I find that most of my clients are sitting right at the 08 level. You know, they're average people that have gone out and had a couple of drinks with their dinner, or gone out on a special occasion, had one or two drinks before they went home. Most of them didn't even feel affected or intoxicated when they were stopped. They're stopped for something petty like failure to signal before they turned into a lane, not letting traffic, you know, accelerate past them, the merging onto the freeway before the gore line was over, just little things like that. They're all walks, and, you know, men, women, young, old, you know, everybody from your, you know, Hanford worker to your deputy prosecuting attorney.
Yes, that's true. Hey, if you want to join our conversation, have you gotten a DUI? What was your experience? And you don't have to give us your full name. In fact, you can make up your name. I don't care. Give us a call. The number is 547-8726. I think it would be kind of interesting to hear what some of your experiences were.
It's interesting that most of us in radio work under assumed names.
Right. Tell me a little bit about, you know, because DUI is driving under the influence, so there can be a variety of, like, prescription drugs, or now marijuana, which is a legal drug in certain situations. So have you represented any of those kinds of cases besides alcohol?
I haven't had any of the marijuana cases yet. Brian Roach in the Tri-Cities and Nick Jones have had a number of those so far, and I think they're doing a pretty good job on representing people with them. But the problem with all controlled substances, and I mean legal medications are also controlled substances, is that, with the exception of marijuana, where they set an actual effective limit, it's hard to tell what a person or how a person is affected by a controlled substance. We had an individual, a friend of mine, represented over in Ellensburg here just recently, and he had in his system Seroquel, which is mood stabilizer of some kind, I believe, and it was at half of its therapeutic value, which means it wasn't even enough for the doctor to consider it being useful in his system. But the prosecution was set that, well, he's got this controlled substance in his system, so therefore it's going to be affected. And when we interviewed the state toxicologist, all the state toxicologist is willing to do is say, well, on these things we have to defer to the state trooper, because he's the one who was on the scene and he's the one that saw the results. So basically we're going back and allowing the police officer to say whether or not the person is guilty on these types of things. And
Well, what was the outcome of that case?
we negotiated it down because we had medical exception. We believe he had a stroke at the time, is what his driving was. And we brought in medical records, and the prosecution was willing to reduce it down to a non-moving infraction. But that's an exceptional case. I had another guy that had Valium. He's come back from the airplane ride, and I couldn't get that one, and he pled guilty to a first-time DUI, and he had 15 nanograms of Valium, which was, you know, like one pill that he'd taken, you know, probably 8 hours before the flight. So it's hard to tell on those.
Well, you're listing some exceptional, far out examples, but there are plenty of people. Still, come on, there are still plenty of people who are driving out there and they shouldn't be.
I was trying
to have accidents caused by it and property damage. Yeah, it's still happening.
And I was trying to use the extreme ones just simply to show that, it's hard to establish what the threshold limit is. Yeah, I've had people that were, high on methamphetamine and charged with the DUI. So, I mean, they were high. They shouldn't have been on the road.
Yes.
And that's easy because the cop comes up and says, they're twitching and they're looking at the lights and they're talking too fast and, they're obviously intoxicated or under the influence.
Yeah.
It's difficult with controlled substance though, because the people that we see who are stopped are usually, like I said before, average people. And the people who are getting stopped with controlled substances, a lot of them are just the guys who are normally on that substance, as a medication, and for some reason they're driving, coding, they've got back problems, and the officer believes that they're affected by it.
Yes. Well, how often do you represent repeat offenders, somebody who's coming in for their second DUI or third?
I'd say that's probably about 20% of our business anymore.
20%?
Well,
That's still quite a bit.
Yeah, maybe a little less than that, but I'd say it's no more than 1 in 5 that's had a previous DUI of some kind. And that includes ones that are reduced, because if you get a reduction to a negligent driving 1, that's going to count as your second DUI, things like that.
Yeah. How do you feel when people come in for a repeat?
Well,
What do you say? What do you say to that client?
it's a repeat on any criminal thing. You ask them, say, don't you learn from your past mistakes? I mean,
Yeah.
what part of what happened to you last time didn't you understand?
Mm-hmm.
The one that amazes me is when they'll say, well, yeah, this time I was talking to the officer and he said he's going to go to the prosecutor and get me a break on it,
Oh, God.
He said, the only reason he's talking to you is because he's already decided you're guilty.
And you basically just admitted it also.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, in your experience, have you seen anything that, in terms of a law or a change in the law, that could help us reduce the number of people who choose to drive when they've had some drink?
No, I think that a real problem of our society is that we think we can legislate things that are a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 3 things that a legislature can never get in trouble for: being tough on alcohol, drugs, and sex offenders. So we keep on making those 3 areas tougher and tougher and tougher. And I don't think that they have the return that they used to. I mean, when we dropped the BAC, back when I first started, it was a 1.5, and then it went to a 1.2, and then a 1.0, and then an 0.8. I mean, there was a sizable group of people that you were including with bad driving that should be arrested at a 1.2 when you reduce it from 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
The 1.0 to 1.2, there's a group of people that are seriously affected at that 1.0 to 1.2 level. I don't know that going below an 0.8 would help us in any way. I don't know that giving any more time in jail would help us. I mean, most average people when they're stopped, 1 day in jail is all they need. Jail has a diminishing return. Once you've been booked in, you've heard the door slam, you spent a night in there, wondering about your safety and sleeping on the cold floor, that's enough to cure most people.
That's a scary thing, yeah.
So the real issue is, with repeat offenders, is how are you going to treat the disease of alcoholism? And deferred prosecution has done pretty well on that. So I don't know how we can legislate any more strict laws to make us, have fewer DUIs.
Maybe we could help subsidize as a community taxi service, and I'm being serious here.
Well,
So that
they do
your
that in Europe.
ride anywhere, if you're if you've had a drink or whatever, is reduced by, I don't know, 50%. I think that finding ways to get people to be encouraged to take a cab might be a better solution.
Well, I remember when I was a young deputy prosecuting attorney here in Benton County back in the 90s, Kennewick Police Department would give you a ride.
Yes. Well, that was only on holidays, or was that all the time?
Maybe it was just on holidays, but that was actually useful. I mean,
Yes, it was. Yeah, I would think anyway. I never took it, but I pondered it.
So I'm not saying it's law enforcement's job to give drunks a ride home, but I'm just saying that shows that some kind of transportation mechanism could be useful.
Yes. So we all should still have some responsibility in that. That's why I look at not free taxi or not free ride, but something that makes it a lot more enticing. All right, Kevin Holt, you have enlightened us, provided us with some interesting new information. Bottom line, though, get a cab. Who wants to spend an extra $5, $6, $7, $8,000 on this? I'm sorry, I don't want you to be making a lot of money on this deal.
Well, and I don't want to see a lot of people spend a night in jail. Those jailers are great people. I love them all, but I don't know that I want to spend my first night there.
Yeah, absolutely. But if I'm in trouble, I might be calling you. Oh, I'm not going to be. No. All right.